Good afternoon, one and all. I have great pleasure in welcoming you all to this afternoon event. We have a very high-profile speaker who's going to talk to us about empowering women in STEAM. As we all know, both in India and all over the world, women are, very active when it comes to graduating in STEM subjects. I hope we all know what STEM is about: science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. There is also an A, which is art and design, which is included in STEM. But however, when it comes to leadership, there is a huge gap. So, and especially in sunrise industries and fields such as energy and entrepreneurship, the gap is even more visible. And that is exactly why we are going to have Ms. Carreon speak to us today. So with these few words, what I would like to now do is invite our spokesperson, Ms. Samantha Jackson, on stage to introduce the speaker to us.
Thank you very much, Ms. Brenda. Thank you, everyone. I'm so delighted to be here, to see all of you here and the support for this program. My name is Samantha Jackson, and I am the spokesperson at the U.S. Consulate General here in Chennai. I'm really thrilled for us to have this introduction. Today we have with us Ms. Alessandra Carreon, and she is the commissioner for the Michigan State Public Service Commission. Previously, Alessandra was a manager in the carbon-free transportation for RMI, and that is a nonprofit working to secure clean energy transition. One of the goals that we have at our U.S. consulate here in U.S. Consulate General in Chennai is looking at green energy and clean energy. She also led projects focused on affordable and accessible electric vehicle adoption and charging. Her work aims to accelerate global transportation, electrification, while also ensuring equity across the battery value chain. She formerly led Ford Motor Company's responsible material sourcing team and spent years in environmental, social, and governance roles. And with that, I would like to ask the audience to give a round of applause to our great speaker, our U.S. speaker that came all the way from the United States to be here with us to talk about, her expertise. And so with that, without further ado, I'd like to turn this over to Alessandra Carreon. Thank you so much for being here. We at the U.S. Consulate General Chennai really appreciate your traveling from the United States to come here and speak to us about this important initiative, what you're working on, what you see is important for our colleagues here in South India. So without further ado, I'd like to give it over to you. Thank you.
Can you hear me okay? Are we good? Okay. All right. Thank you again, or Nandri, as I have learned. So how you say thank you. So I'm truly honored to be here with you all today for many reasons. First, this is my first time in India, and accordingly, Chennai is the first city I visit, and I must say everything has been so wonderful. You all are wonderful. The food is wonderful. So I'm just very happy to be here. And I'm especially happy because, as Samantha mentioned, I've had the opportunity now to meet so many people who are engaging and working on the very topics that I think are critical to transition into a new era of clean energy, green energy, and most importantly, all underscored by more equitable access, equitable development to ensure there are opportunities for everyone in this transition. And so my particular role now is as a commissioner at the Michigan Public Service Commission. I was appointed last year by our state governor, Gretchen Whitmer. And the role I have and the mission of the commission is to ensure that we serve the public by ensuring safe, reliable, and accessible energy and telecommunication services for everyone at reasonable rates. And so while I'm here as a commissioner, what I have to share with you all today isn't a message on behalf of the state of Michigan. I'm definitely bringing in some of my own personal views, some of my prior experience and background to inform the discussion. And I think a good starting point here would simply be that, as Brenda noted earlier, I was very intentional in adding the A to STEM. So science, technology, engineering, math is typically what we think of for STEM. And in some circles or some curricula, you'll hear arts added. And I think this is really important to keep in mind because we know that there are certainly going to be a need, an ongoing need for the hard skills that science, technology, engineering, and math represent. but what is going to differentiate the leader in this space is the ability to communicate, the ability to ensure that you are adaptable to this changing environment, especially, we call it an energy transition for a reason. Things are changing, and so the more that we can also focus on the arts, all the arts, visual arts, humanities, there's an opportunity here to make sure that we're very holistic about how we approach this. And so today what I will aim to do is make sure that I just provide you with some insights, again, from my own experience, but then also hopefully things that may be helpful to you, and then we can engage in a dialogue. I also wanted to share very quickly to underscore why the A and leadership and communication are important, are that there are statistics to back this up. So there are a couple of various reports. LinkedIn, if you're familiar with them, will say increasingly managers tend to focus or prefer soft skills over hard skills. Soft skills are hard to teach. And in turn, some of the most sought after skills from hiring companies, again through this LinkedIn report, are things like collaboration and persuasion. And so again, I just want to make sure that we kind of keep this in mind as we go. I am an engineer, as you'll hear, but I found that over time, the ability to communicate and to ensure that I can adapt to change has been very important. And so a very quick plug for the Michigan Public Service Commission. Again, this message isn't on behalf of the MPSC, but I think it's really important to know where I am coming from and what I'm a part of now. Catherine Peritic actually has spent almost a year in Chennai previously through her own work in engineering, and I will be sure to highlight her. But we also are supported by a staff of 200 people who are experts in all of the areas you see here. So I start with this to say I'm coming from a very STEAM-centric place. We have engineers, we have accountants, economists, lawyers, and all of them are truly dedicated to serving our mission. And so with that, I'm going to start by highlighting the importance of women in minorities or underrepresented groups as a whole is because we know, statistically, studies show that diverse teams perform better. Diverse teams are better equipped to tackle complex problems because by intuition, there's a diversity of perspectives, there's a diversity of experiences that can help inform how we solve problems. And when we think about why energy transition is necessary in the first place with the impacts of climate change, this is becoming an urgent issue to resolve. And so if we can get ahead of this and not only equip ourselves, this generation, with the ability to respond to these problems by having more diversity in STEAM, we can also train future generations and leave things better for the future than where we are now. So some statistics for you to reference. And again, these are going to be focused on the US, but certainly transferable in other contexts and the globe because overwhelmingly women are underrepresented in all fields. But in 2021 in the US, among female workers in STEAM, that men have earned, and this really is a pretty static and stable number. It's not changing. When you look at the proportion of women who are managers, top managers at companies, there's actually a decline that's happening. So it's not only that it's stable, it's getting worse, and that's at only 12%. So if we can focus not only in getting women and keeping women in STEAM fields, but then understanding how much they earn and ultimately how much they are able to progress in these spaces, we can learn a lot. And so just back to trends, this graph shows how the STEAM workforce sort of has evolved over the past 10 years, not only between genders, but ultimately across races and even. These are U.S. Statistics, so bear with me. But you can transfer them elsewhere. And to be more specific, this is for Michigan. We see across the board, with one exception, that there are actually few. In our workforce. So we are a national leader in terms of the number of STEAM completions. We're 8th in the country, and women unfortunately still continue to be underrepresented, even in a place like Michigan. And yet women are earning 60% of total degrees, but only 39% of STEAM-specific degrees. And the top 3 STEAM occupations in Michigan, you can see here, should come as no surprise as an automotive state, but mechanical engineers, industrial engineers, and computer user support specialists. So we have this program within the state that is designed to foster more STEM jobs, starting with education. STEAM, because even those fields that maybe you think are not STEM but are STEM related are still important, because they build out the full ecosystem, even though we can all stand to train more women in science and math and engineering. So our governor happens to have a background in communications and a law degree, so lawyer by training. Our commissioner advisors have degrees ranging from material science to international development to psychology. Our diversity Diversity and Equity Officer has a background in business and an MBA. Our Director of Strategic Operations, which is administering a lot of the strategy behind our energy infrastructure, is a mechanical engineer with an MBA. And our Communications Manager and Legislative Liaison has a history and a background and a law degree. And then I noted Commissioner Paratic, who has 2 degrees in mechanical engineering, worked for NASA, was the first engineer on the commission in decades, and is a woman. And then I came along and decided to keep her company. And I'm very lucky that I get to work with these really incredible people. And I am also very proud to say I'm the first Asian American commissioner on the Michigan Public Service Commission. So I always take pride. Entire supply chain is ethical and protects the environment. Prior to that, I worked as an environmental consultant. I have a bachelor's in chemical engineering from Rice University in Texas, and I have an MBA from the University of Michigan. And then I wanted to end with an important note to pivot us a little bit into the fact that I also have a background in entrepreneurship because I started a company. The company happens to be a pizzeria. So I own and operate a restaurant in Detroit. We've since COVID have closed down our brick and mortar, but we have a mobile oven. And we were very intentional in setting up this company as a social enterprise with a mission to ensure that the food is affordable and that we are a service to our community as well as simply selling pizzas, which are delicious. But I wanted to share that too because I think it's very important to know that as long as you can see someone in that role, you know it's possible. And that allows me to talk a little bit about the importance of entrepreneurship in this space and how entrepreneurship can kind of get hidden as a mechanism to increase STEAM, women in STEAM representation. So I'm highlighting this journey, which is technically supposed to be tailored for the experience of a woman or someone identifying as a woman, but honestly, this can apply to anyone. I think the most important thing is to start with identifying the opportunity, build awareness around the fact that this is even a possible path. And learn from others. What do you want to do? Do you see someone who is doing something that's of marginal interest? Kind of identify and scope out the opportunity. Funding is always very important, and increasingly, again, I'll speak on behalf of the US, we see a lot of opportunities for something called impact investing. Investors who want to make a positive impact and who select to invest in women or underrepresented groups. So this is available. A lot of foundations do this as well. But even if you don't go that route, there are funders who, if they believe in you, they will provide you with grants or other forms of investment. A network is critical. So knowing who you can turn to for help, not just money, but emotional support, moral support. It's very important to think about the whole person in this journey. And then how to navigate work-life balance. Again, this may be for women, but if a woman can find an appropriate work-life balance, guess what? Everyone behind her, supporting her, also benefits from that work-life balance. And then ultimately, if we can converge these things, not just for women, but for their support networks and men and others within community, then we can overcome gender bias, or at least that's the goal. And so, again, how do we know that we could stand to have more women entrepreneurs in STEAM, but in general, in our economy, is we can look at current numbers. So this is from current-ish, this is from 2018, a breakdown of the top 10 sectors of all employer firms, and then the corresponding number of women-owned employer firms, I should say corresponding percentage of women-owned employer firms in the US. So there's even in the most highly concentrated areas of our economy, women still don't exceed 19%, or women-owned businesses don't exceed 19% of the sector. And that's healthcare, where we know a lot of women already work. Then you can go down to something like transportation, the sector of transportation that I'm familiar with, and women-owned businesses only represent about 2.4% of the sector as a whole in our economy. So again, tons of opportunity, and take your pick on where you might want to start a company, because there aren't enough women-owned companies to represent you here. If we think about it in terms of climate tech and energy, which is, again, the space I sort of occupy, how do you measure this? You know, we talked about the wage gap. We can also talk about the funding gap for female founders. So in 2023, only 6.6% of deals were struck with women-founded companies. And that's not, and again, I try to differentiate between US and global. That's not different from the global statistic. 7% of deals that were made were awarded to women in the climate tech sector. So once again, we're just seeing a consistent pattern, which really equates to a really wonderful opportunity. And for anyone who may have questions on where do I start, or what are some of the resources that I can use, these are just sort of some food for thought. So I mentioned earlier networking and mentorship. I think that's always a really wonderful place, because you can ask someone questions directly that may help you with your direct issue or problem or question. Seed funding and grants. We talked a little bit about the space for impact investing that exists here. There are increasingly centers dedicated to supporting women. I happen to be part of an organization, a nonprofit organization that provides mentorship and support for women, including women entrepreneurs. Plenty of resources online and plenty of incubators, again, increasingly dedicated to women and climate tech, and sometimes the intersection of both of those. And I just wanted to end with a few slides that, again, kind of build the case for why this is important, and to help you sort of think beyond your immediate circle. Because the more we can integrate everyone into addressing this, again, not just women, not just placing the burden on women to solve this problem or pursue this opportunity, we can kind of bring everyone up, the rising tide, if you will. So studies have found that when women work, they reinvest their own earned income, 90% of their own earned income back into their families, and that's a lower percentage for men. And what that simply means is that we can kind of extrapolate that to say, is there an opportunity here to redistribute wealth in such a way that our communities can improve collectively? And that's kind of on a global basis. And so where could we do that? Where might, in the energy transition, we find those spaces that will have network impacts in our society? These are just some categories you can use to think about if you're looking to enter the energy transition space, where to begin. Something as straightforward as how we operate the grid. How can we electrify more end-use sectors that rely on power? Enabling and scaling technologies. How do we research more storage, more around electric vehicles, blockchain, or create the systems for digitalizing this work? How do we reinvent business models? When we talk about EVs, that's something that at scale hasn't happened globally yet. So how do we introduce energy as a service? How do we introduce aggregators to think about how we manage the load of these new charging demands? And then, of course, how do you design markets around this so that consumers feel like they're part of it? There are new business ideas that complement all these different technologies. This is truly an endless, and I see it firsthand, there's endless opportunity here to connect. And there's a lot of money. So this chart is really just showing you how global investment in the energy transition is skyrocketing, especially within the past 10 years. And you can note the areas that are getting the most attention are renewable energy, transportation electrification, and then kind of consistently power grids, because there's just a much higher electric load demand. So what kind of jobs can you get in the energy industry? I am using this purely illustratively, so because I hope this can spark some ideas, but we really need everyone everywhere. We are looking for more line technicians to help service and repair lines. We are looking for wind turbine engineers and service technicians, pipe fitters, classic engineers, cybersecurity specialists. As we build out more infrastructure, we need to be able to protect that infrastructure. Data scientists, construction coordinators, and tradespeople, because we are literally building this new infrastructure, and we have the opportunity to think about how each of these jobs comes with its own set of skills that we need to learn collectively. And I'm going to end here. And I know this is about women in STEAM, but as I think about it, this applies to anyone. I think it's very important to define your personal goals and your own mission and to stay true to that. Try to honor that as much as you can. Find the values-aligned networks and resources that can support you as you go. Don't hold yourself back. And then I kept saying this, but I really believe it, and it's made a difference for me, that if you can see her, him, or them, then you can be him, her, them, whoever you are looking up to. And typically that's all it takes. You need to see that it's possible one time, and then you can figure out your way to get there as well. And so with that, I thank you all so much. I'm so grateful to have been here, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have or clarify any points I can.
Hello, ma'am. I come from a maths background. Okay, so I am more interested in data science. So, coming from my background, I really started just building up the skills needed for data science. So, how can I connect with an energy related?
What we are finding is the opposite problem, that we can't get enough data scientists. I have full faith you will be in good hands from now on. It is actually an incredibly sought after set of skills in a lot of organizations. I can say in the energy space, data science applies to virtually everything. And I have said enough times, even within the past 2 days, that the ability to collect data, first of all, is critical in order to make informed decisions for the future. But then knowing how to analyze that data and make sense of it to, again, make the best decisions is really valuable. And not everyone has the ability to do that. So I think that some opportunities for data science, gosh, there are so many. It's everything from even just understanding electrification load forecasts. So electricity consumption by sector, by customer type, and then what does that mean for the future? Where might we expect more load? I mean, that's a major area of data that we're looking at. Data in terms of cost and benefit analysis. How much do things cost? And therefore, what are the benefits associated with those costs? Do I invest in it? So now you're getting into finance that can help the energy transition. So I would say that if you're interested in connecting on data and data science, I'm really not trying to be flippant, but I think that in virtually every organization, you would find an opportunity. And like I said, what we are finding, even in my own agency, is that it can be very hard to recruit because there are so many excellent opportunities that are competing for data science skills. And you're just kind of outbidding each other in terms of compensation and benefits. So I don't know if that's ultimately what you wanted to hear, but it's true. So I'm not just saying that to be nice. It's truly a sought-after skill, without a doubt. And I've seen that when I interview people from all kinds of organizations. Even when I was at RMI, it's one of the first questions. So what are your analytical skills in data?
Thank you.
Thank you. Keep it up.
Just move to the side so you can see me. First of all, thanks for your talk. Really wonderful. Absolutely enjoyed listening to it. Now, I also really was happy to hear you talk about how important it was to have a mastery of both what you called the hard skills and the soft skills. I don't know if you had the pleasure of reading Daniel Pink's book. I can't really remember it, but he talked about how in sort of a left-brained world, the use of your right brain is now going to become a lot more important. And it is going to be more important to make sure that you have the skills of being able to artistically convey what you want to speak, what you want to convey, and also communicate very well. And I'm not too sure if you think that that might be an issue with the quality of education in certain professional or technical colleges or some universities, that maybe they don't teach these skills. I also studied in the US. I was at the University of Tampa in Florida, and I have the UT Entrepreneurs shirt, so hopefully that might give you some motivation to go over there and check out their incubator program. It's a free plug for that university, if you will.
Awesome.
And the thing about liberal arts colleges is that they have what they call the foundation courses for the undergrads. So if you're a freshman and you join there, regardless of what major you would like to take, you are expected to study a little bit of math, a little bit of obviously calculus is important. You will be expected to go back and study your sciences and your arts, practically everything. But then once you finish your freshman year and go into your sophomore year, you start to become a little bit more specialized. I've always wondered about the value of that and thought, would it be productive? But then there's now a part of me that thinks that if you at least have a basic foundation, and they call it foundation for a reason, it will set you apart. And so if you are specializing in business like myself, I was a finance major there. I did my master's in finance there. But if you do have a basic knowledge of some of the sciences and some of the arts as well, how you're able to communicate and how you're able to express yourself, it can, stand you in good stead. And you speak continually about the gap in women still not getting the jobs they deserve, not getting the money they deserve, not getting the opportunities they deserve. Do you think that the education system still needs to have a little bit of improvement? Can it be improved at a technical level? And specifically, what changes would you like to see being made? And did you have any such experiences when you were studying?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you. A lot of really great points and a lot to think about. And I went to high school in Florida, so it's great to see a Florida connection. I do think that, in general, in terms of technical undergraduate curricula, there is a massive opportunity to do more when it comes to teaching, fostering, promoting certain writing and the arts skills. And I guess I would say my experience with that was that I kind of learned the hard way. There were, exactly as you said, for me, foundational courses that I had to take. I also just kind of serendipitously happened to love literature, so I spent a lot of extra time just taking a bunch of literature classes for fun. But once I got to the working world, I found that I just was not equipped. And I mentioned I worked as a consultant first. I was writing report after report after report that was getting edited and redlined and edited, and I just found myself sort of wondering, like, how am I going to do this, because this is the work that I want to do, and I learned how to do this, right? I even have a professional engineering license. I went, all in on the technical skills, but I found that I was kind of struggling with what was expected in the industry for how to write well and communicate well. And so that's another reason why I'm very passionate about this, because I learned it on the job. I think that ultimately there will always be like an on-the-job training that has to happen, because every place is looking for a different style or kind of output. But if there's an awareness for the student to start early, and again, why I say STEAM, AAA, to think about that and embrace it, and maybe like listen or honor even just that little bit of, if you're a maths person or if you're an engineer, to say like, I kind of like the arts. Let me explore it a bit. I think it can only serve you, and especially to your point, in this world where there's artificial intelligence and there's automated everything, the more we can distinguish ourselves beyond the hard skills that can be taught to machines, I think that's ultimately like where we can leverage, back to the leadership gap for women or otherwise. I think that's where we really leverage the distinction between what I learned in college and what thousands, millions of other people also learned, and how I can make a difference. And like I said, I saw that at the beginning of my career, and I see that now when we write reports, and I just have this inclination. Now I'm on the other side of like redlining everything, correcting everything, reading every single word, right? And it's habit. Sometimes I think like, oh, this is wonderful work quality content, but I'm having to rewrite it to communicate it better because we are serving multiple audiences. We are serving the public, and the public must understand what we're doing, right? So that's, it's a long, convoluted answer to your question, but the short answer is yes, there's always opportunity to improve a curricula that may be solely technical with addition of communications, writing, and the arts.
Thank you very much indeed. I just remember the name of the book. It's called A Whole New Mind by Daniel Pink. I believe there's an issue of the book here in this library.
Awesome. A Whole New Mind?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay.
My name is Hazel. First of all, thank you for taking this session. And I was wondering, I don't know how to put it up, but then I was thinking the difference in the age gap and women being reaching the top positions like manager or director. Do you think stereotype plays a role in that?
Plays a role in keeping women from reaching those?
Because I've heard of instances where they say that maybe women are not able to do better when it compares to a man. So do you think that can be a reason?
I certainly, I think bias is pretty rampant. I think we have our own biases as well. Sometimes our own bias keeps us from doing things, our own internalized stereotypes we kind of make into reality. So it's always useful to kind of start evaluating what your own biases may be in order to, think about how does that manifest or how am I expressing that outside. But I definitely think/know, because there are studies that bias kind of hinder people in the workplace. I'll say that even at all the organizations I've worked at, there are mandatory trainings around sort of understanding your own biases and understanding how bias appears in the workplace. But even with that, as you could see, it doesn't really change the percentages. So it's one thing to know. It's one thing to kind of learn and be aware. I think the tricky thing is always going to be then, what do you do next? And I think that's where the opportunity is, to start just behaving a little differently, asking questions, and really just advocating for each other, men and women advocating for women, for men, if we can overcome kind of the collective bias, then, but that takes a lot of work. And we're all working on it, so. But yes, I think it exists.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
There is a question from an online participant. Her name is Amina from Kerala. Are there any internships, scholarships, or programs specifically for high school students interested in sustainability and climate science? How can we as students get involved in sustainability projects or initiatives?
I know for sure there are tons of internships, scholarships, programs dedicated to sustainability. Unfortunately, I don't have any that I can point you to top of mind, but I know they exist. I wish I had something prepared to do that. I'm trying to think if at our commission we often do hire more college internships and student workers, but not so much at the high school level. I know I participated in programs in high school as well, and so was always monitoring for that, but that was a little bit ago. So I know that the availability of that is increasing. But when it comes to how to engage, again, I'll speak on behalf of the context I know, which is in Detroit, where I live, in Michigan. Every high school I can think of has some kind of green or climate action, youth council or youth organization. I didn't list this job, but at one point I actually worked as a green schools coordinator at a nonprofit right before I worked at Ford in Detroit and in Detroit public schools. And so I'm very intimately familiar with the fact that even that the school district in Detroit was intentional not only in ensuring that high school students had access to sustainability jobs, but that the school itself was internalizing some of these best practices around sustainability, saving energy, really thinking about water use, recycling, some of those green facilities kind of best practices and operations. So if you have to look far, meaning if you can't readily find that available in your own school, first of all, please count me as a resource. But ultimately, I think that this is something that's becoming common enough now with the urgency behind climate change that it should be easy to tap into a network of students or youth.
Hi, I'm Kirtana, and you mentioned a lot about entrepreneurship. I've been in sustainability and I've seen a lot of young people my age or even younger than me burst into entrepreneurship, especially with non-profit organizations. And especially organizations that start from the ground level and up, as you mentioned, require a good support system, as in a good team. It's often harder to find people who want to go into sustainability or places that are not general engineering or the more common fields, especially in Chennai or places that such opportunities are more preferred to over the art stream. At least in India, the engineering and science fields are much more preferred to than the art streams. So as a young woman trying to get into entrepreneurship, what would you think would be a good way for me to start networking or creating a team of people not just within my boundaries?
So again, I'm not as familiar with what exists locally. I can say ways that I have gone about it, again in Detroit, because I started a business there, would be that I did spend a lot of time researching, plugging into, volunteering with, and just reaching out to any organizations, and this was even prior to me wanting to start my business, but just out of interest, organizations that had missions, volunteer opportunities available for people who were interested in sustainability or had even, kind of ideas or project ideas that they wanted to implement, and time availability, right? So I think that's very important, that as long as you have the time to dedicate, that, there may be a possibility or an opportunity for you there. And frankly, I did that with organizations that I didn't have any experience in. So I mentioned to you, I'm a chemical engineer, and at that point I hadn't gotten my MBA yet, but I spent a lot of time around people who were green building professionals, because I saw that as the opportunity to kind of engage in a way that even if I'm not an architect or a designer or an HVAC engineer, I could kind of see or make the connections with, well, there's a need here, and ultimately there's got to be something that I can do to support it. And I ended up getting very involved in that organization and many, many, many other organizations. At one point, I felt like a professional volunteer with a job on the side. But I think that was extremely helpful. And it was through all of those connections that by the time I thought that I wanted to start a business, which even if you think about that, pizza had nothing to do with any of the other things on my CV that I shared with you. It really boiled down to, okay, who has a restaurant? I'm going to just talk to someone who's in this space, in this world, and try to learn. And so it does take a lot of activation energy on your part and time to say, if I don't see this readily available, if I don't know a person, I will actively have to seek that out. And I can guarantee you, especially in a city as big and global as Chennai, you're going to find tons of resources that will link you not only to what's happening locally, but globally. And I mean, this is a wonderful place, an example for that too. It literally, like in terms of physical resources, and then just kind of human capital and brain power. But I think that first step that I mentioned, which is kind of knowing what you want and having that vision formulate, is the guide. Without it, then you don't know what questions you might want to ask. And it's okay to ask people all kinds of questions, especially if you're asking someone about themselves. They like to talk about themselves. People love to talk about themselves. So you can ask them, and then they can connect you. I think, and are you a student? Yes. Yes. Also, try to leverage this student status as much as you possibly can, because for people, I think it's very intuitive to say you're a student and you want to learn, and so I'm happy to share resources with you, and this is the time to do it. It gets harder and harder as you get more obligations with work to try to do the same thing. So you're in an excellent position to do that. Yeah, and best of luck. Yeah.
I am from the economics background. Just the talk was very good on connecting women and the environment. Then the question is, though the percentage of women taking up the leadership in the industries is less, because it is said that women after the age of marriage, once they get married, the working capacity reduces in the industry areas. So the attention is more to the family and all that. So what is the way out for that? Then second question is on the environment. The Paris Agreement on 2070, we aim to have zero pollution. So is it possible for that, for the especially country like India?
So yes, two very different questions. I think I'll answer the second one first because if it's India or the United States and setting ambitious targets, I think we need to believe it's possible in order to make sure we do everything we can to get there. So I think at least this is kind of my approach to my work, because I've spent my entire career working in sustainability and the environment. If I'm doubting even for a second that what I'm doing isn't adding value, I'm just wasting my own time, because I know I'm staying in my job. I know that nothing can change the trajectory of my focus and vision in making sure that we have an equitable and more sustainable future. So if I'm questioning it, it's detracting from the collective kind of effort to get there. So yes, I believe it's possible, but it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of buy-in and a lot of engagement and partnership. But we can do it. I mean, we're extremely intelligent humans. Sometimes we make questionable decisions, but we can do it. That's why the targets are there. On your first point about a way out, so I think it's also worth questioning whether that is the reason why, back to like bias, like is that the reason why women aren't in leadership roles? One can't say on behalf of, the millions of women. I happen to have children and I'm still working and I don't live anywhere near my parents or my family members, but I find a way to make it work, right? So I think it really depends on, the situation and the context, and that's what I'm sort of asking, inviting or welcoming everyone to kind of question, which is how did we get there? And if we start with the assumption that there's a reason, and we just discount
But many
that,
studies have proved that.
yeah, and
Many studies have done that on that area, and they have proved that this is a reason.
But I guess what I'm getting at is what are the series of factors that contribute to that having to be the only outcome? It could be that because of family situations, a person has to make a different decision, but those choices could vary with a bunch of circumstances behind it. And every person is different. It's a personal decision. And studies may show that, but ultimately I think it's similar to the second question I answered. If we resign ourselves to the fact that that is the reason, then there's no alternative. Then we can just say, well, we're going to keep it at 12% of top leaders being women because that's the max we can do. Actually, it's also going down. I just am not satisfied with that because I think there's enough, different circumstances that people can exist in that it doesn't have to look one way. I mean, even an increase is going to be better than saying, in this room, I mean, if we look at even the room and how it's divided, I can't believe that only 10% of the women in this room are going to make it to leadership positions, because everyone deserves that opportunity. And so really the bottom line there is simply that may be true from studies, but I think it is never too late to question what might be able to change the circumstance so we get a different outcome, because we're smart enough to problem solve and make sure that more people have access. Yeah. But thank you. Yes.
We've been talking about this climate change for many decades, but the tangible effects are being seen since the past 1 decade, where the climate change effect has accelerated manifold. Like we have flash floods, we have extremes of temperature, but unlike like HIV, AIDS, where there is a global alliance, or when there is a pandemic, COVID pandemic, there is a lot of global working together. I am not seeing that much of advocacy from the entire world, be it industry, be it from the people, be it from the leadership, be it from the environment. The participatory thing is not there. So now that it's gone to the critical state, I don't know how do we have a single point agenda throughout the world without there's differences. Like one country goes against, one country goes for. So unless we have that, we are going to be in real trouble. We were just seeing like an ostrich in the sand. I've been seeing for 30 years. They said climate change is happening, Arctic is melting, but now it's real now, past 1 decade.
Yeah.
So I think there is a huge effort we need. What's your input on that?
Yeah. Well, you said it. We're in a critical time, and at the same time, it's the environment we're in is so complex, and there's so much disjointedness. There isn't that single sort of vision that everyone is working towards. I can even say on behalf of the U.S., every state sets its own energy goals. So even within one country, and here as well, you may have a state that has one policy, it doesn't match in other states. So how do you overcome that? The best I can think of and say and do are experiences like this, where if we're at least connecting with those who have values aligned agendas or approaches, or are trying to at least achieve a similar thing, even if it may not be in the same place or look exactly the same, we need to be able to share the resources and say, this worked for me or this didn't work for me. And that's also why, even as I was describing things, I tried to be very clear, this is in the US, but to the extent there may be, and not everything is going to be transferable, but to the extent something can change in another context, that may be helpful. But it's not a solution necessarily to something, to what you're describing, which is very critical. But I think that, again, just as the prior question, I think we can't resign ourselves to saying, and therefore we don't try or we stop trying. I think it's just, let's be strategic in partnering or in aligning ourselves with resources that can help us get where we want to go faster.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Talking about problems, inequality in wealth distribution, that's a huge problem. Studies say that about 95% of wealth is shared by 2% of the population, world population. So there's a big opportunity there.
Yeah.
What role women can play in reducing that?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, and that is absolutely true, and you see that play out in many ways and all over the world. I think this concept of wealth distribution or redistribution can happen on a lot of levels. Honestly, even as I discussed here, it even happens income level aside. It happens between genders, it happens among races, it happens among ethnicities. So I think your point is well taken in that we can parse it out, back to data analytics. We can parse it out and it'll look different based on whatever we're considering. I happen to sort of subscribe to this idea that there's always opportunity for business model innovation. I will talk about social enterprises as long as anyone wants to, which is really just to say, can we redesign the very structure and the distribution of wealth or profit that is generated from a conventional business to begin with? And so I think there's a lot of opportunity there. Just how do you change business models? And I know India has done a lot of work around the social enterprise and thinking through those pieces. Ultimately, you need to measure too, how effective is it, and is it getting to, is the wealth being redistributed over time? But you can't really do that in isolation. I think you kind of need these ecosystems that foster that so that it is actually happening. So that's one, just business model transformation. And in general, to the extent, that we can think about, like in my case, in the regulatory and the policy space, we have a lot of very intentional call outs to saying, let's start in environmental justice communities. Let's start making sure that some of these benefits reach those communities that are most affected by pollution first, the communities that are most vulnerable, the communities that are low income, that without extra support maybe won't have access to the same benefits as others. So I think there's, on the business and market design side, business model innovation, and then on the policy side, we as regulators, I'm not a policymaker, but for policymakers to think about, if we can design something that benefits the most vulnerable, we know naturally those with most resources will already kind of benefit for it. So how much can we start rethinking our design of systems and policies to say, if we're starting with the most vulnerable, environmental justice community, the low-income communities, if it's going to work for these cases, which, as you said, are the majority after all, all the benefits will naturally reach everyone else. So I think those are the two mechanisms that I can think of: business model innovation and policy that is focused on vulnerable communities.
I have one question online. The field of green technology is rapidly changing. We are seeing change that we cannot keep pace with. Are there any Green Tech 101 that you could suggest that gives young people a grounding on these topics? It could be a course or a book or some kind of a recording. Is there anything that you could suggest?
That is a great question. So I can only speak sort of from my own experience again, and the fields that I know. And the person who asked the question is very astute in saying that this is such a dynamic field that what's 101 today may not be relevant tomorrow, or especially in 5 years, that kind of thing. But for the most part, I think there are some reliable resources. So when it comes to green technology and sustainability, renewable energy, I mentioned I used to work at the NGO called RMI. RMI has RMI.org has a number of resources that they very intentionally publish around 101s. I actually wrote a 101 on EV batteries. So how does the EV battery work? What's in an EV battery, for example? So you can definitely look to that for resources. I think that's like top of mind. And then again, I'll speak on behalf of Michigan, and I think we can always do, as regulators and the government, we can always do a better job, as we were talking about, communicating to the public what we're doing and the importance of what we're doing, and being less jargony, so everyone can understand. But even our own agency, and I know this for a fact with other government agencies, like in the U.S. Department of Energy, there are so many resources on any website that if you were to look for, again, if it's batteries, if it's energy storage, or how does solar work, Department of Energy especially, and the MPSC, will have pages dedicated to kind of breaking down how these systems work. But for the entrepreneurial person that wants to write all the 101s for green tech, please do. I think many people will benefit from it. But those are just some of the things that I can think of.
Hello again. So we are talking about all kind of opportunities and the greener alternatives. So in this age, a lot of models, lot of companies, lot of people are coming up with new ideas for greener alternatives, but still they are still in developing stage, or even if they are gaining momentum, they do not have enough support from the public. Also, it's really largely ignored their efforts. So do you think we have to bring about bans and prohibitions about the non-green alternatives to to boost up greener alternatives?
So I think in that space, and again within policy, there are a lot of efforts in some places to ban altogether, in other places where bans don't exist, to at least prioritize green technologies. And again, just as an example, for Michigan, we have a goal to reach 50% renewable energy produced within the state by 2030. So that naturally opens, the door for more renewable energy technology within the state. So I think you're right, and I think this speaks to the question too of, well, how do you make sure that change happens when there are so many differences in goals ultimately. But I think policy is always a really good lever to make sure that, okay, if we know that at least within this jurisdiction, we're all trying to implement renewable energy or zero emissions technology by a certain time, then we need to make sure we backwards engineer the pathway to get there. So that's a very real approach that a lot of states, governments are taking. Thank you. Yeah.
Anyone? If there isn't anything else, then I would like to thank you, Alessandra, for being with us today and sharing your expertise on empowering women in STEM, and also sharing some of your insights into the topic. I think it will be a very useful. It has been a very useful engagement for. I see a many head nodding there. I'm sure it was a useful engagement. Thank you so much, and I think Alessandra's email is there, and the website is also there. In case if you have a question that comes up later, you can definitely reach out to her, and I'm sure she'll respond whenever she finds the time.
Yes.
Thank you, Alessandra. Thank
you.
you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.